Rachel Anderson had been flying desert routes every weekend for 3 months, without fail. The rebuilt A-10 Warthog beneath her wasn't just a plane, it was like an old friend, heavy, reliable, and utterly dependable in a way those sleek modern fighters just couldn't match. She'd spent 4 years restoring this exact aircraft, tail number 880,914, working nights in her garage after her day job at the aerospace firm. Now, as the morning sun painted the Nevada desert copper and gold, she adjusted her heading slightly, trying to focus on the controls. But her mind kept drifting back to a conversation with her mother the night before. "You know your dad never wanted you flying that thing," her mother had said, voice tight with worry. "He said some aircraft carry too much history." Rachel laughed it off then, but sitting in the cockpit now, surrounded by analog gauges and worn controls her father had once touched, she finally understood what he meant. Every switch and lever seemed to whisper stories he never told. The radio crackled, snapping her back to the present. "Unidentified aircraft, you are entering restricted training airspace. Change heading immediately." Rachel blinked, checking her charts. She was close, but not inside the restricted zone, at least she thought. "Civilian aircraft November 3814 Charlie, correcting course now. Requesting permission to exit zone heading 220, she replied steadily. A pause. Then the voice came back colder, more official. "Negative, November 3814 Charlie. You're in breach of restricted airspace. Hold position. You will be escorted to base perimeter. Comply immediately." Rachel's grip tightened. She knew she hadn't crossed the line, but arguing with air traffic control rarely ended well for civilian pilots. Then, two silver dots appeared in her peripheral vision, growing rapidly larger, F-16 slicing through the sky like deadly arrows. The lead pilot's voice came through, young and dismissive. "Ma'am, you flying that brick on purpose? First time in military airspace or just sightseeing?" His wingman chuckled. "Somebody get the museum crew on standby. This relic's about to scratch the paint off our grid." Rachel said nothing. She'd heard every joke about the A-10's ungainly looks, every joke about obsolete aircraft. Let them laugh. The Warthog had proven them wrong for decades. Visual confirms A-10. The lead pilot's tone shifted to routine professionalism. "Old frame, on markings, looks like a civilian modification, probably a custom rebuild. She's way off chart. Copy that. Treat as low-risk civilian incursion. We'll walk her to the fence." Rachel watched one fighter position itself on her left wing, gleaming like jewelry against the desert sky, a stark contrast to her plain sun-baked, patched-together skin. "Nice tail number, ma'am," the voice came again, slightly mocking. "Can't tell if it's original or just meant to look vintage, a tribute, or something still flying?" Rachel said nothing, and the silence seemed to unsettle them more than any defense could have. She adjusted her heading. The Warthog responded with its heavy grace, continuing the imposed escort pattern. What none of them knew, and what Rachel herself was only just beginning to realize, was that tail number, 880,914, wasn't random. It was a piece of history, sleeping for 25 years, waiting for the right moment to wake. Back in the base control tower, a radar technician frowned at his screen. A blue overlay appeared where there should have been red, an anomaly he'd never seen before. The aircraft's transponder was responding to something buried deep in military records, something that made the system flag the flight not as a threat, but as something else entirely. The alert moved up the chain of command, reaching people who remembered what that tail number meant. People who'd been waiting a quarter-century for it to fly again. Meanwhile, Rachel flew on, bracketed by fighters whose pilots had no idea they were escorting legend back home. The radio was silent longer than it should have been. Rachel felt the tension growing. The F-16s tightened formation, their attitude shifting. Below, the desert opened into familiar training ranges, the same terrain her father used to practice low-altitude runs on. She recognized the canyons from old black and white photos he kept in his flight case, scars across the earth. "Tower, confirmed tail number on target aircraft," the lead pilot said, and something in his voice had changed. The casual mockery was gone, replaced by reverence. "Tail confirmed, 880,914. Repeat, 880,914. The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with meaning Rachel didn't fully grasp. Then, the pilot's voice cracked, uncertain. "Control, Request immediate status hold on this flight. Cancel all aggressive protocol. We are escorting an aircraft tied to protocol roar. Rachel's breath caught. She'd heard that name once, whispered by her father during a nightmare that had woken the whole house when she was 12. He'd never explained it, never spoken of it again, but the way he said it had burned into her memory. Say again, came the wingman's confused reply. It's Canyon hold. Hold. The first pilot whispered, barely audible, that's the tail. That's the bird. In the back seat of the second F-16, a weapons systems officer frantically pulled up historical data, fingers trembling. When the results appeared, he went completely still. Jesus, he muttered. She's flying it. It's really here. Rachel's hands stayed steady, but her mind raced. Canyon hold. She'd never heard the term before, but it felt familiar, like a half-remembered song. The Warthog seemed to sense her confusion, responding with the patient reliability it always had. The lead pilot's voice returned, formal and respectful in a way that made Rachel's spine straighten. Tower, do we have identity on the operator name coming through? Rachel cleared her throat. Registered pilot is Rachel Anderson. Civilian restoration authorization, no other log entries. Another pause. Anderson, as in Major David Anderson? The name stopped her heart. Her father's name spoken with the kind of reverence usually reserved for the dead, but he wasn't dead. He was very much alive, quietly living in Phoenix as a flight instructor, pretending his military service had been ordinary. Tower, need confirmation on relation. Rachel pressed standby, waiting as keyboards clicked and databases searched, confirmed. Rachel Anderson, daughter of retired Major David Anderson. Colline Monarch. The radio went silent again. Rachel could almost hear the collective intake of breath from the pilots around her. Monarch, another name she'd never heard but now was beginning to understand, carried weight. The lead pilot's voice returned, barely a whisper. Ma'am, are you aware of what aircraft you're flying? Rachel found her voice steadier than she felt. It's my father's A-10. I restored it. Your father's the pilot? The pilot trailed off, then keyed his mic again. Ma'am, that's not just any A-10, that's the Canyon hold bird. The aircraft that wrote the manual on impossible rescue missions. In the control tower, Colonel Jennifer Hayes was reading a classified file she hadn't opened in 15 years. Her hand shook slightly as she turned the pages, mission reports, casualty lists, impossible odds overcome by Major David Anderson. She had been a junior officer then, part of a recon team written off as lost. The canyon was too narrow, enemy positions too well fortified, weather conditions impossible. Every conventional rescue option ruled out as suicide. But David Anderson hadn't flown a conventional mission. He flew with precision, weaving between canyon walls at speeds that defied reason, navigating terrain helicopters couldn't touch. 6 pilots were extracted that day, 6 lives saved by a man who refused to accept impossible meant impossible. The mission was classified immediately, buried in files few would ever see, but the aircraft became legend among those who knew the story. Protocol Roar, named for the extraction technique Anderson pioneered, was written into manuals as a last resort option for terrain-restricted rescues. The A-10 with tail number 880,914 had become the aircraft every pilot measured themselves against. The most never knew its true story. And now, it was back, flown by the daughter of the man who made it famous. Colonel Hayes picked up her headset and keyed the frequency. Her voice carried 25 years of respect and memory. Pilot of tail number 880,914. This is Colonel Jennifer Hayes, base commander. Confirm name. This is Rachel Anderson, civilian pilot, daughter of Major David Anderson. Hayes closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the roar of A-10 engines echoing through that canyon, remembering the moment she realized she was going to live after all. You have full clearance. Proceed on any heading you wish. Welcome home. The escort formation changed. Where there had been containment, there was ceremony. F-16s flew wider, respectful now, not controlling. A third aircraft joined, an older pilot who listened to the chatter and chose to be part of a homecoming. Rachel flew steady, but inside, her world reeled. Monarch, Canyon hold, Protocol Roar, they were pieces of a puzzle she'd spent a lifetime trying to solve. Her father had always been different, quiet, careful with his words, deflecting questions about his service. The A-10 in their garage had been a project for someday. He'd helped with restoration in silence, hands sure but sometimes trembling. He muttered coordinates at night, never mentioning Monarch. Rachel, Colonel Hayes's voice cut through her thoughts. I'm going to ask you to land at our base. There are people who want to meet you. Things you should know about that aircraft. Rachel hesitated. She'd planned to fly the pattern, head home, maybe lunch with her mom. A simple Saturday turning complicated. Colonel,